Welcome, everyone, to another edition of SCRC's Let's Talk Caregiving. I'm your host, Roberto Velasquez, President and CEO of SCRC, and I'm here as always with my co host, Marta Rañón, our Executive Vice President. Hey, Marta.
Hey, Roberto.
Today, we have two very special guests joining us on this podcast, Dr. Nadine Hayworth and Mrs. Adrienne Grossman. A little bit about our guest today. Dr. Hayworth is the Clinical Trials Operations Manager at the Shiley-Marcos Alzheimer's Disease Research Center at UC San Diego. Her training and research has focused on age-related cognitive functioning. Her role at the ADRC is that she is the liaison between the community, research, and sponsors interested in drug intervention clinical research studies for the Research Center. Our other guest today is Ms. Adrienne Grossman, and she's a family caregiver to her husband who is participating in clinical trials over at the Shiley-Marcos ADRC. And we're really excited that you're both here today because we want to definitely talk to our audience about the importance of getting involved, participating in clinical trials, and why they're so important, and some of the pros and cons of clinical trials, as well as the perspective of the family caregiver. So we're really excited that Adrienne is here with us as well.
Roberto, I am definitely looking forward to hearing from our guests today, especially because in talking about how to get involved, what is out there that family caregivers can take advantage of. In talking to caregivers, we recently did a live stream event where we talked about research. And some of the questions we were getting were, how do we get involved? How do we know about treatment options? How can we influence the type of research that's out there that's being conducted so that our loved ones can participate? And those are real questions that people are thinking about and grappling with all the time because we know that there is no cure at the moment for Alzheimer's disease, but there are people out there who are doing the research and clinical trials, and we're so lucky to have Dr. Hayward here today to tell us a little bit more about some of those today.
Thank you for the invitation. It's great to be here today with everyone. I'm happy to talk to you about research. At the UC San Diego ADRC, where I'm based, we actually first like to start by explaining the differences in types of research studies. One type is observational studies. So at the ADRC, we have our longitudinal study where we meet with participants and we study them in the normal setting. There's no intervention, there's no change to any of their daily routines. We bring them in, we do some cognitive testing, we do some routine lab work, and we check in with them every year and just see how they're progressing and what's going on sort of across their lifespan or however long they're willing to be involved in the study. Alternatively, we also have clinical trials. These are usually drug intervention clinical trials. So trying new pharmaceutical products and drugs that can be used to either prevent or slow down the decline that people are seeing in Alzheimer's disease and other related dementias.
That's excellent. I really appreciate you giving us some of that information of the different types of trials. I know that we often hear stories, as Martha was mentioning, or questions from people say, "Why should I get involved? What does my loved one get out of this? Is he or she going to be cured? How long does this process take? What do I have to do to participate?" And I'm happy that Mrs. Grossman is here because maybe you can share with us, when you got involved, what were you thinking when you got involved? What was your thought process behind it? Why did you make the decision?
Well, you have to know my husband, who is, he's sort of intuitive. He's very interested in finding out why. He's just normally curious person. He's also very calm, easygoing, and delightful, like personality. I, on the other hand, you got to do it right. I'm a super pushy mom. You name it. I don't know how to describe it. But when this was occurring early in our venture, we were married over 50 years. And it started to impact Michael much more than me because he does goofy things every once in a while. And I started, and in the beginning, I was just saying, oh, that's Michael. He'd get an appointment or he'd repeat something. It was just slight and normal. But he was noticing at work that he couldn't perform as he was. He was also keeping that a secret from me. But at work, he was having clients. He was a tax preparer. He was interviewing them, and they said, "You just asked me that question twice." So that really bothered him, and he started to wonder why that was happening. So he made appointments with the usual primary care, and the primary care uh, more or less poo-pooed it. And he was very disappointed. The doctors would say, "You're normal. Don't worry about it." You gave him the 3 item test, the tree, the whatever it was now, apple tree, Mr. Johnson. And Michael was able to repeat them. And he's a mathematical genius. He's way up there. And he was able to count back by 100, by sevens. And there was no stopping him getting 100 and 100 and 100. Don't worry about it. But he persisted. He went to back to Kaiser, which is our insurance company, and begged them for more psychological workup. So they set up a psychological workup, and I'm not sure whether it involved UCSD or not. But he was given a very thorough analysis. And the analysis, after a while, came up with the fact that there were discrepancies in his memory that were just at the very early stage, but he was so intelligent, quote, quote, that it really wasn't impacting him. He had, it wasn't really making a difference in his life. But Michael knew deep down, as all Alzheimer's patients must, they're feeling something different. We were in Spain 5 years ago and on a tour. And the tour guide said, "Have your luggage out in the lobby at 8 o'clock in the morning, because we're going to get on that bus right away." Well, in the middle of the night, 2 o'clock in the morning, my husband has the lights on and he's busily packing all the suitcases. And I said, "What are you doing?" He says, "We have to have them out by 8 o'clock." And I said, "It's only 2 o'clock." And that was probably the big aha moment for me, that there was something very different. It wasn't just normal forgetfulness. It was just complete disconnect with what was told to him.
Ms. Grossman, I really appreciate you sharing your story and really the challenges that you've gone through with your husband. I'm very curious. As you know, we do a lot to support family caregivers, and we work very closely with the ADRC to provide families those opportunities to participate in these studies and in this research. I talk to so many caregivers and hear from so many of them that there's such a focus on the person with the disease, in this case, the patient, but sometimes the caregivers are not part of the process, and they're either ignored or not taken seriously, or, like you said, kind of be dismissive. And so I'm very glad to hear, and maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that partnership that is the consideration of the family caregiver along with the care receiver.
Because of the way Michael and I live, and our relationship is very close. We're very symbiotic, and we kind of think alike in a very, it's kind of funny, I'm contradicting myself, that we think alike in a very different way. How about that? But we're both intelligent answer seekers. We want to know why all the time. Well, it just so happened, an interesting little tag on the whole story. My son was married to a lady who was 30 years older than he. And what makes that interesting is that she developed Alzheimer's. And he went through that process with her, and we were on the outside edge looking in on that. It didn't scare us, but we laughed at it. It was kind of like, wow, how weird is that? And he struggled much without any support like I have for myself. And today, I guess it's that son that set me straight on how to deal with all this. I know it's simplistic, but he said, it's not about you. You did nothing wrong. You have to just take it day by day and take care of yourself. He kept underlining that, take care of yourself. So when to connect it with the studies, you felt you were taking care of yourself also by having a place to express what's going on.
Dr. Hayworth, I think you're wanting to jump in here.
I think Mrs. Grossman brings up a really great point, which is the different reasons why people participate in research. For starters, sometimes it's people looking for some sort of treatment to help themselves, and that's a completely valid reason. Other times, they are looking for ways to contribute to research and really benefit future generations, so other people don't have to deal with this disease. Hopefully, in the future, once we can find a cure. But it's also a real burden on not only participants but caregivers. And we realize that in these studies, and all of our research studies at the ADRC do require a study partner. And so it's never just the participant coming into our center and participating in different research procedures on their own. The caregiver is always with them at every step of the way and will also be interviewed and have questions that are directed towards them as well. And as part of that, we also offer community programs such as support groups for our participants and our caregivers. We have those actually hosted by social workers as part of our team to really support both the participants and the caregivers, because there are very different needs for both populations.
Yeah, that's really important to provide those resources to the family caregivers and to the entire family for that matter. The challenge that I think a lot of family caregivers undergo when deciding whether to get into a study or not is that they're not really aware or understand the whole process. Some people, especially in other cultures as well, might not like the fact that at the end of a particular study, there's a donation of, let's say, the brain, or in diabetes it might be the eyes or something else. And so that they might have gone in with good intentions, and then at the end they go, the family says, no, you can't do that, you can't do that, he'll never rest in peace, or other things like that. So it's really important to really understand what the whole process is involved in. Maybe Dr. Hayworth, you can explain why those pieces or components are important to the studies.
Yes, absolutely. Each study does have its own eligibility criteria and required procedures. So, this is something we will always talk to the participant and the caregivers before they enroll in a study to make sure they're comfortable with everything that's required for the study. Some of these procedures include blood draws, imaging such as MRI, and cognitive testing mentioned earlier, the pencil and paper assessments that we do with individuals. And as you mentioned, Roberto, there are a lot of cultural sensitivities. And so we're sure to discuss these things with the participants and their caregivers to make sure they are comfortable with what they are getting involved with a research study. And the reason we ask for all these different procedures is because we can gain so much knowledge from the cognitive and biological processes and seeing how they change across the lifespan.
Well, and I think this is why it's so important that you mention this, because everything's up front, you discuss it. And that's why I love the whole concept of a study partner, which Mrs. Grossman is with her husband. As a study partner, you're understanding the process. Because the person that is in the study, in this case, your husband, Mrs. Grossman, with Alzheimer's, the condition continues to progress, and the person's ability to make decisions kind of just goes away with the process of the disease. And you, as the study partner, can stay in tune to what's available, what are the benefits, continue him on the longitudinal study with full knowledge of everything that needs to happen. And I think that's incredibly important, especially the communication piece. I want to just share a quick personal story. My father passed away a few years back, and he was didn't have Alzheimer's. He did have diabetes and heart problems. He was in a number of studies through another provider. I won't mention the name, and but he didn't tell anybody. He didn't tell anybody that he was in these studies. He didn't even My mom didn't even know. And they were married over 40 years and had a wonderful relationship. But, he would go to his doctor's appointments because again, he'd just do it on his own. And he was involved in these studies. And then when he passed away, we got a few phone calls from the research groups, and they were asking, hey, your dad was in a study. We're here. We're going to go collect the eyes. And my mom said, "You're not touching him. You can't do that." But she had no idea what was going on. So I really like this concept of the study partners and the communication, and how Ms. Grossman has been so involved with her husband since the beginning, since the onset and the decision to get into a study.
Dr. Hayworth, I wanted to ask if maybe you can tell us, especially to our listeners who might want to participate or at least know a little bit more about your clinical trials, where they can go to find more information or to connect with you.
Yes, all the information can be found on our website, which is adrc.ucsd.edu, or you can reach us through email at participate@ucsd.edu, or reach us at our front desk at 858-822-4800. And we'd be happy to talk to you about any research studies that you might be eligible for, or any support groups or quality of life programs that we have available for community members to participate in.
Thank you so much. And I wanted to ask, I know we're probably going to be running out of time soon. So I wanted to ask Mrs. Grossman if what can she leave our listeners with? How do you want to motivate others to take these steps and participate in clinical trials?
I don't know what I can specifically say. I just know it's a general attitude that you can have more support that way because you're talking to other people all the time. They're letting you know what's going on to some extent. There is a drawback in the sense that they can't tell you why my husband has Alzheimer's. They can't say a description that gives me more to hang on to. Is it frontal? Is it back? Why is he still able to have a conversation? Why can't he read the calendar? It was just so crazy that we could not deal with the nuances of the disease was so baffling. But because we are curious people, it was easy for us to get into it. But the people who are reticent because they don't want to hear bad news. When you get the diagnosis, you just don't want to hear it. And you have to convince caregivers that this gives you a team to be with. Somebody else is going to listen. It's not just in your lap. But to be realistic, the success of the studies is not as prevalent as you think. When I'm in the support group for UCSD with Tracy, and you hear all kinds of stories of this, went through this study and this one, and we got bad news. It didn't work, or there was no answer. I never heard what happened in the studies Michael went through. All I know that he was good while he was mild, but as soon as he became more moderate and severe, the studies weren't interested at all. So you have to be realistic and know that you're not going to change the world that fast, but what little you do, the research benefits from. Donating his brain was the ultimate way to know what was there. When people said, yes, they donated the brain, and we got a complete story of what happened. And Michael and I both felt that was important. And also, I found out because he wants to be cremated, it's easier because I don't need to preserve the body. And so, in my mind, it's just more for medicine than it is for my own personal being. And my family feels the same way. So, you have to have family support as well.
Thank you for sharing that, Ms. Grossman. The whole idea of getting involved in research, we need more people such as yourself and your husband to participate. There's a lack of involvement of people volunteering for these programs. And that's kind of one of the most altruistic things that somebody can do is be involved in research, because you're really getting involved to benefit the future, the next generations, because we know that the more the studies, the more people are involved, the more participate, the more we know. And so that could lead to new drugs, new treatments. And for Alzheimer's, unfortunately, there hasn't been anything that has cured it, but you participating is incredibly important, and we hope others join in and do the same. Last words, Dr. Hayworth?
Roberta, I want to encourage more people to participate in research. A big issue in healthcare in general is the lack of diversity in participants in research. So it's something we are always trying to focus on and trying to reach more members of the community so that the results that we find are more broadly applicable to everyone across the population.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. Well, that's all the time we have left for this edition of Let's Talk Caregiving. To hear more of our podcasts, follow us on your favorite podcasting platform or visit our website at scrc.care. I want to thank Martha for co-hosting another important discussion, our guests, Dr. Hayworth and Mrs. Adrienne Grossman, tuning in with us and sharing your stories, and of course, our audience. If you are providing support to a loved one, you don't have to do this alone. Asking for help is not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength. To connect to our programs and services, visit our website at scrc.care or call us at 1-800-827-1008. If you live outside of San Diego or Imperial counties, visit caregivercalifornia.org and connect with the local Caregiver Resource Center near you. To support our efforts and make a tax-deductible donation, please go to scrc.care and click on the Donate tab. And remember, SCRC is here for you,
caring for those who care for others.
Thank you.